Okay, so we are back. What is this? June 8th with the Resilience and Self-Love discussion group today, talking about um, transformation in a way that speaks more to the journey itself and some of those bumps and kinks in the road that may happen. Okay, so I'm Shea Toastin. If you've never heard a discussion with me before, the thing I like to say most is doing everything except keeping it cute about personal development and self-love, because there are things that will happen that are not desirable, that we don't really think of on the way. Even though our transformation is a beautiful thing, everything happening doesn't always feel beautiful. Okay, so today's topic is going to be the tree that fell, right? So, welcome to the group. We are discussing the transformation process in a way that's focused on shedding old versions of ourselves, okay? And how we process those old versions being referred to or brought up, and sometimes when we decide to bring old versions of ourselves back into existence for protection or defense, I like starting this conversation with the classical philosophical riddle. I'm pretty sure most people have heard it. It's the question of, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it indeed make a sound? Okay, I like this riddle because it raises some questions about perception and existence, and that's something that we experience during our transformative processes as we live life. So I want to take a moment, have you guys weigh in on that. Do you think the tree is making a sound if no one is there to hear it? All right, so we'll pause for a moment and have that discussion. Okay, so we had a hodgepodge of responses there, and a lot of the times when this question is being debated, the answer is often no, because we really focus on the fact that someone has to be in earshot, right? Has to be in the presence, has to be there to see or hear the tree falling or feel that vibration and hear that noise, right? But even if someone's not there, the tree still produces that sound wave. It still gives off that vibration. And so when we're talking about that tree today, we're saying whether anyone is there to experience it or not, then we are still giving off that vibration. We are still giving off that sound wave that sheds the old self and begins to present that new, whatever it's bringing in. All right. So in short, for us today, the answer is yes and no to this discussion. So there is no wrong answer. Um, maybe we distance ourselves from people as well. That's part of uh, transformation processes for some individuals, right? Especially if we're running into any type of opposition or criticism, where people may not take well or resonate with the transformation that we're having. So sometimes it's for a time frame, right? We may need to take a break from people. And sometimes we decide that we're detaching or isolating completely, right? But no matter what's going on, whether we stay connected or we disconnect, that process of transformation is happening for us. And sometimes we may not view it as transformation when we meet new people because they don't have knowledge of that old self, right? So, um, what happens when we connect with those folk again that we lost contact with, right? If it's family, maybe it's a family gathering that we have to go to, maybe someone passed away, maybe it's a celebration, maybe it's a graduation. Again, if it's that short time frame, we're coming back together, so people may not recognize the way that we're moving about in our lives now. So they experience our transformation, but really all that they have is the memory of the old version of ourselves. So I want to first look at the fallen tree as the outdated version of ourselves. whatever the past identity is. Maybe it's a behavior pattern that we no longer participate in. Maybe it's a role that we no longer are choosing to fill or feel the need to. And so then we move into the fall, right? That is the transformation itself. Some people might call it the ego death, right? But that's the part of growth where we're growing from. And no one being there to hear the tree falling, right? That's the release still that's happening. Um, Whether we are releasing that or embracing that release physically, emotionally, or spiritually. And all three can also be experienced as well. So I don't want you to think that it has to be one or the other. It can be all three, okay? And in this case, three things can be true at the same time. So if we're now thinking about the illustration in those terms, here's how I want to start our main discussion, right? So if no one is reacting to your transformation, is the old version of you really gone? Okay. And if someone does react, is that person reviving an old self, right? Or do you feel obligated to listen to the revival of that old self when people are expressing opinions about how you're showing up in the world today? So let's take a moment. I really want to have an in-depth discussion there. And so that's how we're going to kick it off, okay? Okay, so I want you to think about what part of you has recently fallen, right? Was it the old role? Was it some type of belief system or habit? Was it a pattern of engaging individuals or identity? And then did anyone notice? And if it's yes, then what was the response? Right. So we were digging out those things in our live conversation here. So I want you to take a moment to reflect on these particular two questions if you are taking a look at the replay, right? And as you think about those two things, I also want you to be thinking about when others respond to your growth by pointing out the old version of yourself, the old habits, the old beliefs, the old role. Does that feel like support to you? Do you feel supported when individuals are expressing their opinions and their feelings about you shedding your old version, who you are expressing now and how you expressed before? Or um, do you feel like they are expressing just a revival? Like, do you think they're trying to have you be that old person? Okay. I always do this. Now, I also wanted to bring up, because we often do have the conversation about how other people feel about our transformation and our growth, and whether there's opposition or support for that, right? And how that kind of either grows our relationship with someone or leads to a pause in the relationship. But also consider, have you ever revived your own quote unquote fallen identity, right? So that you can feel heard and understood. And one way that you might see this is, let's say, for defending yourself or being able to speak up, right? So for myself personally, um, there was a time when I was described aggressive in my communication with other individuals, a time when I was described passive. And I knew that in that passive period in my life, which was exactly 3 years, in that passive period in my life, it's something that I chose. And it was based on external feedback I was receiving for individuals because while I considered myself assertive, right? So first I was being described as aggressive. And based on the feedback that I was receiving, I intentionally wanted to be assertive, right? Where I would be able to speak up in situations where I needed to, but also be able to receive feedback, constructive criticism in a way that would benefit me in my personal development and my growth and my resilience, my self-love and things of that sort, right? But while being assertive, I noticed that there was still a lot of opposition. Everyone still wasn't resonating with me. And I got into this space where I was feeling like, well, what all am I doing wrong? And maybe everything that I'm doing is causing hurt for people around me, right? And so then that's when I intentionally chose to go into this passive response to individuals, right? Let me try doing the things that they would like me to do versus the things that feel good to me, that feel right for me, that I resonate with. And it was indeed uh, not the best experience in my life, right? So then I returned to being the assertive person, and I started understanding that every decision that I make, people will not be excited about, right? Because I'm making a decision that's best for me, not a decision that's best for them. And when I was making that change, although I was not being aggressive, right? I was working on my emotional regulation. Still making choices for myself wasn't necessarily something that was beneficial to individuals that I was engaging with, even though they were healthier decisions, right? They still didn't benefit the individuals I had surrounded myself with. So there was still some opposition that was being experienced there. So during my passive times, right, I decided that, hey, this is not who I need to be. It doesn't feel good to me. It's not beneficial to me. My experience, I felt like I was always walking on eggshells with individuals, right? Always trying to play to their experiences, but still not being able to quote unquote please them in a way, right? And so that was a time when I decided, no, 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 we're gonna have to bring the assertive attitude back, right? And I'm just gonna need to get comfortable in that space and be comfortable with the fact that people may not take to it very well. Some people, when you're assertive and you know exactly what you want and you get in a space of knowing how to express that, they may take it as aggression. And mostly aggression because it doesn't mesh well with how they want you to operate. Okay. So it does feel aggressive, but really it's oppositional. It feels oppositional to what they're used to, right? The access, maybe sometimes it's about access to you, right? How much time they're able to spend with you. If you have a best friend and then you get married, right? Then your best friend may not have as much time to spend with you because you have decided to reprioritize your life, right? You have a relationship that you have to maintain there and a household that you have to maintain. And so it may take away some of the time that you were spending with your best friend. And so best friend may start feeling left out or feeling less loved, right? When there's not less love, just it has to be redistributed. Like it's distributed in a different way now because there's more that has to be shared. When you have children, right? Your relationship with your spouse, your significant other, that may change a little bit because of the needs of the child and how those have to be met, right? So there's a different reshifting that's happening there. Okay. What else? Maybe with your parents and relationships, right? Mothers moving out of homes and I mean children moving out of homes with their mom. And so there can be, if we're talking about one parent, right? Then there's this empty nesting that's going on with them, but also uh life is being redefined for the parent, right? Because where maybe first was the priority to care for the child, now the care is not there because the child is experiencing autonomy, has moved out of the home, right? So then there's this reshifting that's happening in their lives, and if they're unable to detach from that particular role, then it may feel like smothering or being burdensome, right? Or, okay, you're not letting me experience life, right? So then there's some friction that happens there. So all kinds of relationships are going to take this transformative process. And so you may find that, okay, I didn't have to do this before, but I see this is going to come in. So think about the times that you've had to revive an identity that you once thought was wrong or causing hurt or pain, uh, in the environments you engage in the community that you're a part of, okay? And did you feel that you had to do that just to be heard or understood? Was it something that you felt was temporary? Was it something that you reprised to say, I thought I didn't need that, or I thought I didn't enjoy that, but it wasn't me making that choice. And so now I'm readopting. I'm gonna say that. I'm readopting that behavior or that pattern or that belief habit. And if you do, is it healthy? How have you decided that it's healthy for you? Okay. What would it feel like to let that part stay silent? What would it feel like not to readopt that part of you? Would it still feel like a healthy experience, right? Even though it may bring more opposition, more conversations to navigate, what would that feel like? Now, when we have the falling of the tree, right? What we can do is just understand that the commentary that people have, even ourselves, can be an echo of that tree falling. That is the response that is happening, right? So I wanted to start with a couple of reminder sentences that you can repeat to yourself. Maybe you can consider them mantras or affirmations or turn them into those things if you like. But two things could be going on at the same time. You could be transforming and you could be unhappy about how it's going, and other people can be responding in a way that is undesirable as well. But you want to remember that the version of yourself that you're letting go, that you're letting fall, like that's okay. Okay. And the process that comes with it is okay. So then you can choose to let it rest in peace. So that's why we wrote it that way. One version of me I'm letting fall is blank. And I choose to let it rest in peace. That's the choice that we make, right? Or you could have, I no longer need others to hear the sound of blank in order to believe that I've grown, right? So we can stop falling into patterns that causes us to validate who we become or ask other individuals to validate that, right? So these are a couple of sentences that help us kick off our reframing experience, right? Hold on one moment. Okay, my apologies. That was an important email. I guess someone tried to get into the meeting. That's the other thing. If a meeting goes in at the 10-minute mark, usually I do not um, let other people in. So I do apologize about that. The nice thing is though, like with this meeting, there is a recording for a replay. So I will send that out. Even though it does not include the discussions, it does include the information to go through. So sorry about that, guys. So yeah, we have the echo. Okay, people are responding to the echo of what they remember. It doesn't mean that we have to bring those identities, patterns, you know, experiences back to be able to quote unquote please the people in our community. So what is needed? What can you do? There's a couple of things that you can do to try to work through these experiences and the feedback that you're receiving, especially if you feel unsupported by the feedback. When someone is criticizing your transformation, you have to remember that we are, and when we are criticizing other people's transformations, don't forget about that. There's basically a reaction from our own fear of change, right? Our own fear of losing control, right? And identifying the fact, especially if we felt we had some type of control or influence over an individual, or that individual felt that they have control or influence over us, right? That's something that is going to create some discomfort, right? And there's a space of unfamiliarity that is being navigated at that time, right? So you kind of get like knocked off your block, right? And if you get knocked off your block, you have to do a rebalancing. Now, some of us never get to that point of rebalancing, and that's when you have to know that what is healthy for you, what is good for you, you're allowed to choose, okay? You don't need to absorb anyone's projection, and no one needs to absorb your projection. Instead, you can ground in your truth and set energies and emotional boundaries. Okay. Sometimes people will not see us as we see ourselves, and vice versa. We won't see people how they see themselves because we don't have all of the information. Life is an inside job, right? So we're bound not to have all of the information. So most times responses are just a result of not being able to give ourselves the same gift that someone is giving themselves, or vice versa. They're not able to give themselves the gift that they view us giving ourselves. But when you listen to that, right, it's still being identified as a gift, no matter how uncomfortable it's getting in the space. So be reminded that the discomfort belongs to the other individual or to you, depending on what role you're playing at that time, right? Um, and that's a discomfort that the individual has to deal with, whether it's you or the other person, all right? Um, we each have uh, our own discomfort because it's our responsibility to witness the truth of our experiences. It's not our responsibility to witness the truth of other people's experiences. And we can hold a space for other individuals, but we don't navigate those spaces and vice versa, right? So these are the ugly truths of transformation. So what can we do to navigate through these more resistant times? One, we want to keep engaging in thoughts, affirmations, and activities that help remind us that our transformation or our evolution, it doesn't require permission or approval, okay? And that allows us to continue strengthening our own voice. We can use the 3 R's tools, what I call it, the recognition or recognize, reclaim, and redirect. So what you want to do is give recognition to the criticism, but not take ownership of it. Reclaim your narrative, like the 2 statements that we have previously, okay? Because this is your process of becoming, you're not broken. And so sometimes criticism can make us feel like we're broken and that we're not in the same space. So it's important that you be able to reclaim your narrative and then redirect your focus inward, okay? What does your intuition say? What does your soul say? How are you feeling, right, during this transformation? The new things that you are adopting, how does that feel? What do you feel it's going to bring in for you versus the old patterns of belief or the old patterns of behavior, all right? It's also important, I believe, in focusing on your strengths as well, not forgetting those things because our strengths can be the bridge that's needed for our transformation. So identify your strength, whether that be courage or creativity, perseverance, right? And we can operate in those strengths to get through difficult times. Journaling, writing things down can be a great reminder for us. And there's this hand-eye coordination that's happening with the brain as well, and then solidifying that within our subconscious. So journal how your strengths are being activated during your transformation, right? So first you identify them. Once you identify them, then focus on how they're being activated, how they are being built, right? During your transformation, and really let that be your metric for if you're doing well or you're not doing well. Don't let other people's comfort or discomfort need to be the validation for your transformation and if you're having a good experience. Communication, all right? There's always a lot of talk about isolation, detachment, and withdrawal, and all of those things are an experience that you will have, right? And they are tools that can be used effectively in your experiences at the right time. And you have to be able to decide that time, right? Too much of anything can be difficult, all right? It puts us out of balance, so to speak. with the people that we love and that we're close with. Maybe you live in a household with people, maybe it's with your partner, maybe it's with your children, and you're like, I desire to still maintain some type of relationship or an amicable relationship with individuals, or I don't want this to tear us apart. A lot of times it's about our communication and how we communicate sometimes, right? Sometimes you can communicate on, as effectively as possible, and it's still not going to be a desirable experience for the other person. So you have to decide your boundaries and what your limitations are. But as far as communicating, that can make things a little bit smoother. Sometimes when people don't understand, they're still willing to be supportive, all right, when we have that communication. So when we talk about communicating, I always talk about the ask. Like, what are you asking from the other individual during this transformation time? And here it's like, okay, I understand that maybe you don't fully agree with what's going on, but this is what I need. I need emotional safety, right? In order to evolve. And I need to know that you can honor that. Again, knowing boundaries and being able to communicate those boundaries are going to be important during the ask, because it's going to be probably a more in-depth conversation, especially if you're living in close proximity with someone, or having to do something with someone all of the time, right? Maybe you guys are on a business together or something of that sort. So you can't just completely detach it and cut the individual off. So you have to find ways that are going to be effective for you to work through the discomforts. Um, don't be afraid to name the pattern, okay? Sometimes folks just don't understand what's going on. And even though we don't have to always explain everything that we do, that communication is just laying a bridge, right, to get from one place to the other. All right. Um, if someone that you love can or won't support that growth, um, communication is all that you have, and that's your validation that you did try to create that bridge, right? You can name the pattern with somebody, because when you're navigating this space, you want to be coming from a loving place as well, and not doing the same things that you're asking that person not to do. So sometimes when we're going for the ask, we can be criticizing the behavior of other individuals as well, and that may not be our intent, but that's how it's being received, right? And so now we're getting into this pattern of criticism being exchanged for criticism, and it makes it difficult for each individual to be heard and to walk over this bridge, right? Um, so those things also lead to greater experiences of distancing and detaching. And sometimes with each of us still not understanding, like, how did we get here? Okay. How did we get here? All right. Instead of getting down to where are we going together? And if we want to go there together, right? So when we name the pattern, you're not saying that you did this or you did that. That's not the relief that's going to come with your communication, okay? When you name the pattern, saying something like, I feel criticized when I grow, right? Because there's some changes when you grow, especially if in relationships, friendships, people watch you become who you are, right? From a child into adulthood. So you want to feel supported, and you don't want to feel pulled backward, right? Examples are good. You want to be able to use examples because that's the evidence for the other individual. They may not even think that they're doing those things, right? But it's good to identify the behavior that you think is criticism so that you guys both are working from the same plane, right? So maybe your loved one doesn't view their actions or statement as being unsupportive. So having specific examples is going to kind of direct that conversation. And you don't need 1,000 of them, okay? Because it's not supposed to be a record of misbehavior. Okay, that's not what it is at all. It's just putting you guys on the same page, right? So you can be evaluating the same thing, and how you received it may not be how the loved one meant it, and vice versa, right? So One or two examples is good because you want to be able to avoid statements like you always, okay, or you never. Those are damaging statements. And we may feel that way because at that particular moment, we're just recalling all of the times that maybe we felt unsupported. So it may feel like always, right? But that's actually probably not the reality. All right. Um, you can hold space for discomfort by allowing your loved one to express how they feel as well. Have that platform. Be open to hearing how your transformation is changing their experience with you. Okay. But stick to your boundaries. If they can't honor your boundaries, talk about how you may need to respond, right? You may need to close conversations like, okay, we're gonna put a pin in this right now and then give it a few minutes to come back to it, or I'm not able to continue this conversation right now. Can we talk on such and such date? Just give it some space to breathe. um, when you give it space, it also gives people a chance to reflect as well, and then just come back to it and kind of let down some of the emotion and charge that can be in a conversation like these. Um, it could be that cooling period that's needed, right? It may require some detachment from certain activities, like let's just say it's something with using substances. You want to make a change. I don't want to smoke weed anymore. I'm not doing that right now, right? And you know that at gatherings, that's going to be part of the festivities. So maybe you're communicating to your loved one, your friend, your family member that, hey, right now when you're having some get-togethers, I won't be attending because I'm working on this thing or whatever. So it's not that I don't want to spend time with you, but maybe we can do this, right? And then it's give alternative things that can be done, because this person may be worried about spending time with you. If you're not coming to the gatherings, this is when I get to spend time with you. And so now you don't want to spend time with me when it has nothing to do with that. You're just working on your boundary of not engaging in a particular activity for whatever reason, right? And you want to be able to be honest about those strengths, right? So maybe you need a little bit of time to build strength before you start resuming attendance at those sessions where that will be available. Or if you decide that you just don't want to be around it, then you can decide, hey, let's meet up for this or do that, because I'm deciding that I won't be attending the gatherings because of this, right? And then that brings the conversation back to respecting what your choices are for your autonomy, okay? Instead of attacking each other. That's what we're trying to avoid in the communication, is attacking each other, because that's a distraction from what's really going on, right? So you can hold space for discomfort, right? And still have boundaries around disrespect. Okay, so if they can't honor your boundaries, then you lovingly have to release the need to have their approval, right? But we can help in trying to reframe some of those situations. And I don't know how, see, the conversation just kind of flows, but sometimes conflict and distance, it is fueled, okay, ignited based on our view of what's happening and what we perceive to be appropriate or respectful, right? What we think those responses should be on both ends, how people think we should receive them and how we think people should receive us. Like, this is good for me. You should see that it's good for me. And so why are you acting this way, right? Why are you trying to get in the way of my good? And that's how we can be framing the situation when the person is just simply expressing losing some type of connection or time with you, right? So reframing is one of the most powerful tools that we can use in scenarios that involve criticism and rejection, especially when we're talking about it under the guise of transformation and making healthy choices for ourselves. So it's shifting you from powerlessness to agency, right? Without denying what the emotional reality is for both you and the other people in your community. Now, we may think, oh, this person is rejecting me, but honestly, they're rejecting the version of you that they were comfortable with. Remember that. We are now in a space of discomfort. We're out of our comfort zone. I'm not sure who this person is. I'm not sure how to react. I'm not sure that I like this person, right? So that's what's happening here. And when you are uncomfortable, you try to readjust and get comfortable again. But what we have to remember is that's a process, right? If you sleep at night and there's some type of discomfort, you might turn on the fan, you might kick off the covers, you might leave one foot out, you might adjust your sleeping position, but all of those choices are still a process. And it's not any different when we're going through transformation in our personal lives and engaging with our community during that process. Okay, so reframing helps us create some emotional distance from feeling attacked. All right. It helps us reclaim control over our identity that is becoming, right? Because sometimes, even though we feel like we're letting people down or we're harming people, um, it's just discomfort. All right. And so reframing helps to reduce some shame, remove some of that shame that shouldn't be assigned in the first place, right? And sometimes we can internalize some blame for the hurt and the pain that other people are experiencing, especially when that's not our intent, right? So with reframing, it gives us an opportunity to engage our higher mind, our higher self, right? Not just the hurt that's experienced during this transformation. So when you're reframing, you're activating your prefrontal cortex, and that's the rational, if you want to call it wise part of your brain. But that's the part that's helping you regulate your emotions, right? Emotional regulation and avoid reactive decisions which can damage the situation in our relationships more. But it helps us to really anchor into our self-awareness without getting caught up in the trauma looping, right? Um, it helps us to communicate the truth of the matter, okay, the real parts of the matter, rather than getting caught up in the feelings surrounding that truth, right? Because it's too easy to get caught into just blaming this and going into other parts that have nothing to do with the confirmation of what's really going on, what we're really feeling at that time. So that's the trauma looping that I'm talking about, right? We start attaching on to other things that have happened in our life, right? So now we're outside of the frame and context of this particular conversation that's going on between you and your loved one. And then they start grabbing onto situations that are outside of the context of what's going on in this particular conversation. Okay. So if hurt feelings do come up, try to think of hurt as the evidence that you indeed are going through your process successfully, right? We don't like hurt. We don't like discomfort, but discomfort does what? It pushes us to grow, right? That is the healthy stress that happens in our life, okay? And the discomfort is just evidence that you're indeed shedding that old skin. It is being noticed. That is the validation, right? Even though it does not feel good for our loved ones in our community to push back on it. The criticism doesn't need to be received as an indication that there's a setback or that, oh, this relationship is about to fall apart. We're not going to get through this. It shouldn't be received that way. As a matter of fact, be focused on the fact that you will get through this, that this is weather that needs to be navigated, right? That weather that needs to be navigated. So it's a sign of moving forward because friction happens in evolution, not failure, right? Um, um, the waters get a little choppy, but we can still sail through those waters, okay? So let the friction and encourage you to stay on your path. Even when people don't fully understand what your path is, you have to remember that it's not other people's job to understand what your path is. It's your job to understand what your path is. And then you can communicate. There's ways that you engage people while you're on your path, all right? Um, their understanding is just not required, just yours because you're the one with the answers, right? And so you're mostly communicating answers, communicating explanations as you choose because you're the person who understands. And what happens when you don't understand something? There is a little confusion, there is a little frustration, right? So that's just what's happening on their end, all right? But you have to remember that you're the person who has to be comfortable with how you show up in the world, okay? That's you. So in terms of resilience, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? I've heard some folk refer to reframing as delusional, right? Because it's like, oh, you're trying to make things be what you want them to be. But those reframing and delusion is not the same thing, okay? The main difference between reframing thoughts and delusional thinking is about their relationship to reality and their function and well-being. So reframing is reality based, okay? It acknowledges facts, all right? Um, but it shifts the perspective because you can have more than one perspective about the same event happening, right? So reframing is choosing our perspective, how we choose to process what's happening, so that we can respond in a healthy way. Okay. So it opens the door for problem solving, even when feelings and scenarios get a little bit complex. And our worth is still preserved in that process, even when we feel our actions are under attack, right? A lot of times you think people are attacking our well-being and our worth. And when in actuality, they're just processing those actions and trying to adjust to those because it's not what they're used to and it's not what they're comfortable with. Okay. Delusion is more fixed in a false belief, right? It cannot be supported with reality. It cannot be like facts are not acknowledged. It's a disconnection from reality, right? Which is resistant to any type of feedback, constructive or otherwise, and resistant to logic. All right. So evidence is not a part of delusional thinking. Because facts are usually denied. That's when we're unable to be accountable for our own actions, right? And I'm not calling anyone delusional. I'm just saying accountability is definitely not part of delusional thinking because then that would be acknowledging some facts, right? The part that we play in our experiences and things like that. So if it was delusional thinking, then we wouldn't be open to any type of adjustment, which is what we're doing when we're in a part of transformation. We're making adjustments that are healthy. We're accepting new information as it becomes available. And again, making adjustments, right? So we may believe that folk are criticizing us. This is probably not the best example, but it is something that comes up often. So let me see. How can I really phrase it here? You might hear a lot of people talking about like, oh, this person is criticizing me, even if it's constructive, right? This person is saying this or doing this because they're just out to destroy me, out to destroy my spirit, right? And don't want me to have a healthy existence. But there should also be evidence and signs of this person sabotaging and interjecting themselves in a way that's not healthy. Another way that I could think of it is something that I've told one of my kids, right? So you're playing sports or whatever, and you have a coach. A coach is helping you perfect your style, your stance, your sportsmanship, right? So their commentary, their constructive criticism is meant to improve the experience, right? Not to attack you personally. Okay, so we would be thinking about it in that sense. So if we're not able to accept new information and look at the facts and things of that sort, then we may be thinking that this person's constructive criticism is meant to tear me down, right? I hope that's coming out right. It's the best illustrations that I have right now. But everybody in your life is also not a coach. That's not the role that they're taking, right? So, and that's why I tell people you have to know who to share your experiences with, share your downturns with, share your low moments with, because everybody's not taking the low moment and holding the space for you. Or if that person feels the need to give commentary, everybody's not giving commentary with your benefit in mind. Some people will be giving commentary with their benefit in mind. But again, there will be evidence of that, right? So everyone giving commentary is not there to tear you down. And sometimes people get together and they're talking with each other, and maybe those people are resonating with commentary that you do not resonate with. And so it feels like a personal attack as well, right? So again, it's just about that reframing, taking in the facts, right? And knowing the choices that you're making for yourself and that you have decided are healthy. And sometimes it will not be received in the same way that you presented it. All right. So it's just as simple as that. Those things that don't feel good, or those things that happen to push us out of our comfort zone, is we can definitely have a deeper conversation on that. That includes accountability as well. But the bottom line is reframing just helps you engage reality with more power, right? So that's that illustration about the coach being there to improve your game, right? Not giving you commentary to make you feel like you're not doing well, or to tear you down, right? Or to tell you that you're a bad player. So delusion just detaches you from reality in ways that cause harm. Okay. So I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that reframing means that you're lying to yourself or using it as a way to minimize pain, because that would be the wrong way to use the tool of reframing. Okay. Reframing means to choose an interpretation that helps you grow forward rather than spiraling or crashing out. Okay. So you can hold two truths at one time. And in this case, it would be that this experience, this conversation, what you're communicating to me hurts, but it doesn't negate the fact that I am still worthy, right? Of being my best self, of expressing myself in a way that I feel comfortable with showing up in the world. All right. So those two things can be happening at the same time. And this helps become or grow your emotional self-validation, okay? And not be dependent on whether other people accept you, your comfortable presentation, your authentic expression of self, okay? So yes, this is hurting, this is uncomfortable, but that discomfort doesn't mean that I'm not worthy of being my best self that I've identified. Okay. Okay. I'm going to end the conversation there because I think this is something that we could talk about and expand on. And I think the last couple of sessions we have kind of talked about topics that are surrounding our self view and how it's received by other individuals and how to navigate those spaces when there's pushback or criticism for them, right? Because usually when everyone's supportive, we're just, oh, everyone, we're going along and we're fine, right? But it's these spaces when it can be difficult for us to navigate. So I'm not sure exactly what the next week's conversation is going to be about, but I should know by Wednesday, I think. What I'll do right now is go ahead and open up some discussion for those in the live experience. And then those watching the replay can have some reflections, right? To whether you're journaling or maybe you're with someone to discuss this with. But the intent is always for you to leave the session, the meetups, the discussions, knowing that it is healthy for you to choose yourself, okay, and define how you want to show up in the world, to align with your authentic self, right? And that you're making the right choice in doing that. Even though it doesn't look the same, it won't look the same for everyone, okay? Your authentic self and the process that you go through is not going to look the same as someone else's process in achieving their authentic self and how they show up in the world. And so there's not this cookie cutter blueprint that everyone has to say that they're doing it right or wrong. And we are also going to be on the receiving end of feeling some discomfort when people are going through their transformative processes, okay? So I'm just encouraging everyone to choose your truth based on how you deserve to feel, and choose to love yourself first, okay? Not how people make you feel. Not attaching to your worth. Don't attach your worth to if people are accepting, right? If people make you feel low, it doesn't mean that you're undeserving. If people make you feel excluded, it doesn't mean that you should not be included, right? But a lot of times we desert ourselves, we're exclusive, we exclude ourselves automatically, and we'll do it because, oh, this person doesn't resonate with me. Okay. So even if someone doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't mean that you're not in a healthy space. It doesn't mean that you don't have a healthy view of yourself. And it doesn't mean that you need to feel uncomfortable about how you show up in the world. All right. So if this is your first time, I do welcome you back on any given Sunday, even on recognized holidays, wherever you may be located, every Sunday, unless there's something that technically happens, and that has happened before, the meeting will go on at the same times, okay? There's two meetings, one at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time and another meeting at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And the second session includes topics about the womb, the womb woman. So it is a space procured for women only. All right. Thank you all for showing up and showing out for yourselves. I do look forward to meeting up again. And so we'll go ahead and get into our closing discussion if we're here live.